G'day fans and welcome back to another exciting DNA reviews which we've just slapped together in an absolute hurry because good old Strange New Worlds came out a week ago and Aaron and myself were discussing, we're going to review it, we're going to talk about it. I only watched the last 3 episodes today, so we just decided to slap this one together and sort of see how it goes. Mr. Aaron, how are you going tonight, old son?
I'm going well. I've still got a bit of a sore throat, but we'll get through it. It warms my heart to see Star Trek blueprints in the DNA titles at the beginning of the show.
Very, very cool. I've got Mr. Colin has already joined us. Absolutely. He's one of the stalwarts of good old Austrek, the Star Trek fan club, of which I am a life member, so I've got a vested interest in this particular discussion. So we're having a bit of a yap about good old Strange New Worlds. It's a series that's sort of like really sort of set the Star Trek world on fire. And the irony being, of course, before we really get into the meat of it, and is the fact that, now I'll just show this now just so people who know that what we're talking about, this is what we're on about. We're talking about the old, good old Strange New Worlds. And of course, as you may or may not know, kids, there will be spoilers. So I thought I'd just chuck that one in for good measure. Before we sort of kick it all off, the thing that I found unbelievably interesting is that the first episode of this series aired on the same day that the last episode of Picard Season 2 aired. Is that what you call a kick in the guts or what? What's the deal with that, dude?
I don't know if they did it as a publicity for Strange New Worlds, or is it on a rival station and they just did it?
I don't know. But I mean, you think... Go on.
It's one of those things where didn't Star Trek piecemeal the rights out to different companies at the moment?
It's a freaking joke, isn't it? But the thought, like Captain Picard, just very quickly, Picard is such a key character in the whole Star Wars ethos that they go, they've produced these series. It's supposed to be the greatest thing since sliced bread. Season 2, as we've reviewed previously on DNA Reviews, Picard Season 2, which kind of worked and kind of didn't work. But the spin-off show from Discovery gets aired. The premiere episode comes out on the same day as the last episode of Picard. It's like, mate, that is a kick in the teeth for good old Jean-Luc. I mean, imagine Jean-Luc, Patrick Stewart's going, oh, it's the last episode of my show. Oh, hang on, I've already been superseded by somebody else on the same day. So, yeah, I reckon that's whether they be on similar networks or not, I don't know. But I thought that was really bad timing. I thought they could have at least waited a week, get the dust settled from Picard, get the fans going, oh, that was a completely shit show before they get straight into this. That's crap. Switch stations. Oh, now we've got real Star Trek going on. So what do you think, son?
It's really interesting that you say we've got real Star Trek again, because in my heart, I was watching it thinking, wow, this is what I've been missing for a long time. This actually feels like real Star Trek again.
Yeah, well, the irony is, of course, the good old Strange New Worlds is a spin-off from Discovery. And in the past, I don't know, a few weeks, couple of months, it's like Discovery has just disappeared off the face of the earth. No one talks about it. No one cares about it. It never gets referenced. And everybody's either referring to the Lower Decks or those shows, or in live action, this show. And it's kind of funny. So the spin-off has actually really superseded the Prime show, if you will. And, of course, that has sort of led us to where we are at the moment. So, if you're the producers of Discovery or the people involved with Discovery, you must be sitting there going, yeah, we've kind of cocked this one up, kids. What do you reckon?
Well, I think the thing is, with everything that spun off from Discovery, and I think there were other things in the pipeline as well, it is all the same set of executive producers that are planning it. It's just, I don't think some of the other shows have landed as well as this has. And Discovery, I guess, being the reboot show and what they were aiming to get everything going with, this seems to have already in one series struck a chord with fans that none of the other series have. Discovery, I liked, but after 3 series, I gave up. I liked, and then they changed the format. And then I liked, and they changed the format again. I mean, not really the format, but the characters just did changes between series where you're sort of reintroduced and so I kind of didn't like that they did that. But they introduced Captain Pike and Spock in Discovery. They were very different from the original Pike, Captain Pike and Mr. Spock and some of the other characters. And I found they have landed in a way that's when they reboot stuff often doesn't happen. Sometimes when they reboot stuff, it's way off. Some people liked the new movies. A lot of people didn't, because I think that didn't really embrace the original Star Trek in the way this has. What did you think?
Well, yeah, it's sort of interesting sort of discussion, isn't it? I'll get to my thoughts as we get further along. But you are right. The characters and that get introduced in Discovery. People go, "Oh wow, it's Pike. We can actually relate to this character because he was obviously appeared in the Cage from the original series, and you got the Enterprises come back and number ones come back and all this sort of thing." And it's almost like as time has gone on, fans have said, "Oh, we love Strange New Worlds Discovery. It doesn't exist," and it's kind of funny how there's been just this big fan push to get this show created, and it's almost like, wow, this has worked out so well that it's, as I said earlier, it's superseded the show that it came from, which is kind of rare when you think about it. You've got the primary show and the spin-off, and the spin-off is more successful than the main show. But we're here to talk about good old Strange New Worlds, and we've said, as I said, we sort of just chucked this episode together. We're only going to go for an hour, just talking about the whole thing. I guess now what we can cover off is all the characters, the crew, if you will. Does that sound work for you?
It absolutely does. And I guess you've put the slides together, so let's just go through them and have a discussion.
Cool. Like all good shows, you've got to start off with your crew, and some of them, of course, we saw in Discovery, and some of them are all brand new. But good old number one, in this case, on the extreme left-hand side, she did actually feature in the Menagerie in the Cage, the original pilot episodes of the original series. Although in this instance, they've actually turned it into an Illyrian, so she actually got some genetic enhancements, which of course leads into a bit of a thing later on. So that's a sort of an interesting sort of twist, because as we know, genetic enhancements in the show are not real, or in this universe are not the done thing. So how have you found her characterization, old son?
I have loved it. In the original Star Trek, the pilot, which was eventually used in the Menagerie in the Cage, I guess it was the Menagerie and it became the Cage, she was the character that had no emotions, like Mr. Spock, and then that got merged into Spock. And I love where they've kind of done that here, where fun goes to die is what some of the crew have called her, and that would kind of be a trait that Mr. Spock might have. But I love how they've done it in a way where it's an alien, but it's not the same as Spock. She's very, I guess, Starfleet oriented, where she is very good at her job, and that's why some people think she doesn't have the emotions and stuff. And I think Rebecca Rumjan has done an amazing job. I think she's a great actress in this. I don't see her as Mystique or any of the other roles she's done at all. She has owned this role totally.
Man, she got a name too, Una. I had to really sit and think about that, because later on in the series they made a reference to Una this, and who's our Una? I'm not used to hearing the name Una, but So and of course, ironically, in terms of like the way the pictures are shown, Majel Barrett Roddenberry played number one in the original pilot episodes, and of course she ended up playing Christine Chappell, who's at the other end of this particular picture that we're showing here. So yes, other than good old Spock, Uhura becomes an ongoing member of the Enterprise crew in the long term, so we already know what her story is going to be. And how did you find it? She's only like a cadet, or if I'm not mistaken, in this particular series. So how have you found her?
I think probably she's one of the characters they've changed the most. And I do have to say, Strange New Worlds benefits from not being the first show to reboot these characters, because we've had the movie and they rebooted these characters before. I think fans maybe aren't as precious because it's happening again, because it's already happened before, and you've had people with opinions saying this is great or this is not so great. But if you do it for the first time, there's always going to be a backlash. But because this is the second time, I think people are more forgiving, and I am more forgiving this time around, because it's a very different character from the original Star Trek Uhura, but I don't mind. And I'm really interested to see what they do with it. She's obviously a much younger character and a cadet who doesn't even know if she wants to be in Starfleet. And that's an interesting way to develop this character.
Yeah, I think if the series is set 10 years before the original series, so you got a fair bit of time to spend before you get into the Kirk era. And of course, Uhura's on board the ship, and you do wonder when all the others start rolling up. I mean, Scotty, as we know, so as it appears in the it was the alternative timeline. What doesn't it? So he hasn't appeared yet, and of course you got all the others, McCoy, etc., etc. So you do wonder if you'll see as the series progresses whether these guys all get introduced. One person, of course, who's been on the ship since the Discovery time, which of course is the same character and the actor as well, he's also a carryover from the Discovery era. And I did actually like the fact that the show actually covers over or carries over from season 2 of Discovery when all those sagas took place. And of course, Spock was a key player in that time, and he had the beard and all the rest of it. Now he's lost it all, and he looks like a completely normal Vulcan, if you will. So,
yeah.
And I think he's sort of come to life in this one. So he's worked out really, really well.
Yeah, I was really impressed with Mr. Spock. When they originally did it in Discovery, I was a bit leery. I was a bit, okay, they're recasting Spock again. They're going to do Mr. Spock again. And I would probably, this is probably quite controversial to say, he would probably be the best Mr. Spock for me. I thought they've really hit a chord where they haven't copied the original, and they've changed him a little bit, but not enough to alienate original fans, but make it interesting. And when I say he's my favorite, it's not that I think he's better than Leonard Nimoy or anything like that. I think they've been able to do in this series what they couldn't in the original, and that's add emotional depth and a backstory to it that just 60s television didn't do. And that's why I think he's been much better served as this version as Mr. Spock than the original, because they didn't have almost the emotional resonance that they do with a modern series back in the 60s. It was more an adventure science fiction. And if you tried to do some of the more character elements, it would lose the audience at the time, where now television had advanced a bit more and you can do that and push these things.
Yeah, it was I agree with you. When they first recast the new character and go, oh, Jesus, this is really pushing the envelope a little bit. This will be the third iteration. So obviously from Leonard Nimoy. The guy who, Zachary Quinto, who I thought would have been fantastic in this show, but this dude's actually done very, very well. So in the end, he sort of slipped into the role, worked out his place in the world. Now that he actually looks like Mr. Spock, it's actually coming across okay. So I've got to say, I think they've actually done quite well with it. And I've just got to put a shout out here to the Vile, who's actually a bit crook at the moment. So I just wanted to say, get well soon, Mr. Vile, and good to see that you could still join us. Now, of course, the main player in the whole show, of course, is Captain Pike, right? And we know what his fate is. It's covered off in this series because it links into original series. The thing I couldn't work out, his characterization is fine. I got no problem with it whatsoever. I can't work out why they're giving him the grey hair. I mean, the guy isn't even 50 yet. In real life, the actor's only 49. So he's actually younger than me. So I actually don't know what the deal is with that. I mean, it's only a small thing, but there are occasions where his grey hair is really, really prominent. And I mean, I'm sure that's not natural for Anson Mount, but other than that, Pike has actually done quite well for the show. The only downside, of course, is that when James Kirk turns up later on, you think Kirk would be the primary player in the show, but of course, it's all Pike's series, so he's got to be the main protagonist, as it were. But have you found Mr. Pike, dude?
Well, what I can say is this: I don't know why they've done Chad in the shop with grey hair either. It's just some people go grey younger, I guess. That's a comment for someone we work with. But I was again surprised. I do think when they were introduced in Discovery, and they weren't just side characters in Discovery, they were there and developed the characters for a while before they jumped over onto Strange New Worlds. I find Captain Pike one of the most likable Star Trek captains we've ever had. And he goes up there straight away with Kirk and Picard. For me, is a very likable and a very good captain who doesn't make silly decisions, is very human as a Star Trek officer in that he doesn't follow the book, but he does it in a different way from Kirk and Picard. So he's been sort of the human Star Trek captain of the Enterprise who has become a unique character but follows in the footsteps of the original Captain Pike. One of the first things I ever knew about Star Trek, because I grew up in the time where the series wasn't on and it wasn't on video as easily, was the Star Trek cards. And one of the cards that grabbed me straight away was a card called The Fate of Captain Pike. And it was just this dude who was horribly disfigured in a wheelchair. And that really struck a chord from a young age for me, wondering what the story was. And then, of course, I saw Menagerie and the pilots and the cage and everything like that. And it's a really interesting backstory. It adds a bit of pathos to his character, doesn't it? That he knows what's going to happen to him, where he's going to wind up. He doesn't know it actually turns out okay if they go down that route. So it is interesting to see he's been pulled back into Starfleet. he second guesses himself where he shouldn't be because he doesn't want this to happen and he knows the future. So it adds a different slant to a captain from what we've seen before. I think it's a great representation of Captain Pike.
Yeah, it's interesting because the last episode, episode 10, of course, is a really big deal regarding his actions and his reactions and what happens if certain things don't go a certain way and the implications for the future. So he's sort of set on a path that he can't get away from. And of course, for people who love the original series, episode 10 was probably like, oh my God, it's like one of the greatest things in the entire universe. And I agree with you. He sort of knows where he's going to end up. It's just the journey of what happens when he gets there. And you are right. Do you make decisions that impact that fateful outcome or not? So, yeah, but you are right in terms of a character who has to really set the scene. In terms of like what we saw in Discovery, I mean, Pike and this has worked out really well. Even if he was just a brand new character, it still would have fit the mold just beautifully. So, of all the characters we've looked at, they've all been in Star Trek before in previous iterations. Now we get into the new people. We sort of kick it off with Ortegas, who's the helms man, whatever you want to prefer you call it, and of course. She's prior to Sulu, of course. I think of all the characters, I personally think she's probably one of the weakest, and not just because she doesn't have much to do except fly the ship. But it's great, but I wouldn't class her as being memorable. I don't know what your thoughts are.
I think it's interesting because I don't think she's really had much of an A story on the series yet. What I do like about her is her interaction with the other characters is good. When she is talking to Captain Pike, they obviously have a rapport. I don't know if that's just the actors, but the characters do. And also when she is developing relationships with Number One as well, they actually have a good relationship. So even though she hasn't really been brought to the fore, and you're right, she isn't one of the strongest characters yet, it is like, Sulu, where he sat there for a lot of time before he got, and Chekhov as well, before they got more stories. They're good, likable characters, and I think she's a good likable character, which is one of the highlights of this series for me. This is probably the first Star Trek series in a while where I'm like, I like this crew. I like all the members of this crew. They're not all perfect, but they're very likable, which is why I think the show is good.
Yeah, I think she sort of like takes the voice of the audience on occasions too, and with the quips and all the rest of it. Ironically, as I just realized when you were talking, I thought the lady who plays the navigator, who's the Asian lady, she's not listed in the main cast at all. So I don't know who she's meant to be, but and she doesn't feature in any of these images. So she may have just sort of been added in towards the end. And of course, in the episode 10, she's actually quite prominent in that as well. So interesting. Another character, and I wasn't aware of this at the time, is the Doctor. And of course, during the Cage years, in the episode of The Cage, which is where Pike was very prominent, the Doctor's name was Philip Boyce. But it turns out M'Benga actually does appear in the original series twice in A Private Little War and That Which Survives. And I thought, oh, I didn't know that. So there's a nice little touch of continuity for you, even if it doesn't fit exactly within the timeline of the series. But and of course, he's got an ongoing story with his sick daughter who's stuck on the transporter buffers and all the rest of it. So, it was something a little bit different. What are your thoughts?
So I didn't know that either. I did not know that character had appeared in the original series. I think he is a really good Doctor. Again, different from what we've had before, but not different enough to be sort of unlikable. I think he's a really good Doctor. I don't know if the whole thing with his daughter stuck in the transporter buffers really works for the time period it was set in, because transporters were not as they couldn't even beam between ships in warp and planets. They went into that in Enterprise and things like that. But for the character it works, and I'm not going to nitpick too much about it. It gives him something interesting that's never been done before.
Yep, no, totally agree. All right, so one of the things now, of course, as Star Trek fans, if you've been around in the franchise for a long period of time, certain things go, just set off alarm bells. You go, oh, that's interesting. And of course, the moment you heard the name Noonien Singh, and you go, oh, God, get a bit of Khan action. And that's exactly where this lady comes from. Lan, I think it's Lan or Lan, I can't pronounce the first name, Noonien Singh, and she's actually a descendant from good old Khan Noonien Singh. And of course, she's a security chief, which is funny because in the original series, there was no security chief, if I recall. But she's come on board, and she's got a bit of a chip on her shoulder, and she's had issues with the Gorn, of course. But I actually think she is actually really, really good.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. When they introduced her in the first episode, and it was a Noonien Singh, the whole thing with this being sort of a big prominent thing in Picard, I instantly sort of recoiled and thought, oh no, not again. They've just done this in Picard and now they're putting it in this. This was much better done than having Brett Spiner in Picard being a Noonien Singh. I thought this was kind of more natural. They talk about the eugenics wars and
hang on. Well, I'm going to cut you off there. Noonien Singh and Noonien Sung are two different families, right? The Brent Spiner version is Noonien Sung, not Singh. Okay,
yeah.
So just.
But he brought what I'm talking about. I did say it was him, but he brought out the Khan file at the end of.
Yes, he did. Picard. So yes, he is responsible for the eugenics war. Sorry, I just want to make sure that there's no relation. Yeah.
And
anyway,
I would say he would have lent his name to it as well, sort of. But anyway, let's not go into it. We're talking about this. Thought she was a fantastic character. Thought the thing with the Gorn, we have seen this in science fiction before, where you've got a character going back out into the unknown. Ripley is one of them, where they have a beef with what's happened with the rest of the crew or the rest of their family. Obviously, setting up the Gorn as the big bad presence in this series.
Yeah, and I'll get to later on, which theoretically you can't because they don't officially appear, a bit like the Romulans until the original series, but they are able to drip feed bits of them in and get away with it. And you go, you know what, it kind of works in that regard. But yes, it is interesting that she brought up the Gorn. We haven't sort of referenced them ever, really, and not in Next Gen and not in Picard and not in Deep Space Nine and everything. And all of a sudden, the Gorn are floating around. Okay, not even Enterprise, whatever. So I thought it's a good thing. It's not a bad thing.
They were in Enterprise. In the one with the Thorians, they have the Gorn, a Gorn as a pet, and it's very similar to the Gorn that appears in this series.
Okay, all right, yeah, fair enough. I was thinking more of the adult version, not the younglings, as it were. With that in mind, so something that did carry over from Enterprise, and I thought, well, this is an interesting sort of take, was the Aenar, which were first introduced in Enterprise. The albino versions of the Andorians, which was particularly groovy, and of course Hemmer was that. The only thing that I was disappointed with, they did this in Enterprise, and I loved it, is they didn't animate the antenna. Right, the antenna is designed to show their mood. Right, so if the antenna are split apart, they're pretty ambivalent. If they're pointing forwards, they're really attentive, and all this sort of thing. And in this, they were just makeup sticking out the top. So I thought that was a come down. They did it in Discovery as well. And it was a real letdown. And I thought, well, come on, guys, you got to. If Enterprise, which was made 20 years ago, can have the antenna animated, albeit it is a distraction, I won't deny that. But to give the character some life, then to not just have him just sitting there doing nothing, I thought, it was a bit of a letdown. But that aside, he was okay, not memorable, and of course they got rid of him at the end of the season. But how'd you find good old Hemmer?
So what do you think about them doing that? I thought that was good, where they kill one of the main characters in the first series.
I did read about it, and they wanted to deliberately show that not everybody is immortal, right? You are going to lose. It's like that guy who gets promoted to a lieutenant, even though he's not wearing a red shirt, he becomes a red shirt, and he gets his promotion and killed on the same day. I thought that was kind of cool. I mean, the idea of using an ANR or blind dude in engineering, I thought, it's okay, I got no problem with it. Although a lot of people would be thinking, if you have never seen Enterprise, you wouldn't get the reference. And of course, you've got to make way for your normal crew to come in at some point. So I thought it was good. But
what's interesting with that for me, Erica and Ortega are very similar characters in age, and they're female, and they look dressed in the red and everything. I thought if one of them would be knocked off, it might be one of them, because they're similar. I was surprised they killed off the alien. In every Star Trek series, there is the alien for people who love aliens. And this was the series they've knocked them off straight away. I thought his grumpy demeanor was really good. He was very likable for a grumpy alien.
Maybe they took it because they said, you know what, we need a budget cut. The dude who wears all the makeup, piss him off so we don't have to worry about it anymore. So just point the pointy ears on the dude and on the other guy, and we're all good to go. Everybody else is a human being cooking on gas. And just finally, we're going to get to the last one, of course, is the second character, who's played by Majel Barrett. So she actually bookends both ends of this particular picture. And of course, that is Christine Chappell. And she's given a lot to do in this particular series, and I think is the breakout character in a lot of ways. I personally am not a fan of the whole white skin tight suit. I think it's an exploitative thing that harks right back to the Next Generation and Deep Space Nine and Voyager. But as a character, I think she's really, really good. And I like how they discuss or come across her original attractions to Spock, which of course carries over to the original series as well. So, but I think, Chris, out of all the supporting characters, I think Christine Chapel has done really, really well.
Well, I agree with you. She's come a long way from Home and Away, hasn't she? So I thought, again, this is what I was saying with Spock. They've already done more in this series about, the love triangle with Spock and Spock's feelings and where it's going to go, to the point where I really want to see how it plays out. So I think she's a very sincere character in how she plays it. It's very believable, her reactions with Spock. And she comes across as a really nice member of the crew and a good nurse too. So you're absolutely right. She is definitely one of the stars of this show.
I did like the fact that she was giving Spock advice on relationships, right? Not realizing that down the track she herself would, get into a pseudo relationship with Spock. So I thought that was kind of cool. It worked out really, really well. So that's the main cast. There are supporting people. We'll show some pictures of a bit later on. Regarding the good old ship, as far as I understand, it is similar to the Enterprise that you see in Discovery. It's the same model. They did have to apparently make some changes, 25% of changes to it to keep it legal or some other reason. But otherwise, the old 1701. The only thing that they haven't worked out is the size of it, right? Because you look at the original series, Enterprise, which was 400 and something meters long, and you get to the interior shots of this, and it's a bit like Star Trek, the 2009 film, and everything's huge. I mean, the captain's quarters are bigger than most homes that most people have, and it has a fireplace too, if I'm not mistaken. So when I saw this, I go, yeah, right. And his ready room is enormous. It's like, what's the deal with that? So if anything, the scale is all asked about, in my view. And I thought, I get rank has its privileges, but dude, you could squeeze in like a dozen people into this space and get them to live there. So how did you find all that from a production design point of view?
The main issue I thought I was going to have in the first episode, you see this fantastic retro looking Enterprise, and then they go inside and it's really dark and lit like Voyager. But from episode 2, I don't know if you noticed this, they actually found the lights and put the lights up. So I thought that was instantly better as soon as they did that.
Well, it's funny you should say that, because you go to the bridge and there is a shitload of lights, and they've taken lessons from J.J. Abrams. They got lights around here, and they got lights around there, and lights on the stairs and all the sort of stuff, and all the lights on the roof, fair enough, and around there. It's like, yeah, there's a lot of lights there, kids. And that was the Asian lady I was referring to earlier. I have no idea what her character is called, but I was thinking, yeah, there's a lot of lights in it. It's a hell of a lot brighter than it used to be in the original series. What do you reckon, old son?
Yeah, I did wonder if she was going to be revealed as a Sulu or something like that, because it looks very like his daughter, who was in, I think, Star Trek 6 or 7.
It's Generations.
Generations, yeah, 7.
Yeah, Generations, yeah, because she's serving on the Enterprise C. Oh God, I'm stretching my memory now, but yeah, you are right. The whole thing's lit up like a Christmas tree, and there's like space everywhere. The corridors are really big, and even back in the original series, some people thought, the corridors are way too wide, and of course they did that because they had to fit the camera crew in. And in here, they're even bigger again, and you go, all right, there's a bit of a suspension of disbelief there. So, and the other thing that's really, really groovy, speaking of lighting up the bridge and all the rest of it, like, no 4x3 TV screens here. This is bigger. Big ass screen time. And I do believe it's meant to be a window, I believe, which of course you do wonder, is it made out of transparent aluminium? Thank you very much. So what do you reckon?
I did love how they have these massive screens and it's all well lit, and they still do the thing where Spock or Uhura looks into that periscope thing I was like, really? They have to still do that? But I guess that's a nod to the original Star Trek. I love the design, how they've incorporated different imagery from different eras. And I think I said to you, this is how nerdy I am. Where they use the red alert from Wrath of Khan comes up, I was like, they've used the original. They used it. It is real fan pleasing stuff.
Yeah, totally agree with you. And you are, yes, sorry. It was the Enterprise B, because Enterprise C ends up in yesterday's Enterprise, and the Vial, as I said so as well. So there you go. Very, very cool. So, yeah, so the ship is really groovy. They do a lot of stuff with it. It's very cool. I'm not a fan of Kirk's, Jesus Christ, Pike's quarters, because even in the original series, I mean, all their quarters are relatively small. Even in the Next Generation, right? Like the crew have their quarters, and you can look in the air. You know what? I could see that fitting inside the ship itself, right? Even Picard's quarters aren't gigantic, and you look at this and you go, yeah, hang on, sorry guys, you've like given him a penthouse apartment in what is meant to be a ship. Even real admirals and that on aircraft carriers in real life don't get quarters as big as that. So if there's a suspension of disbelief, that is definitely it. And so I understand the people who've made the show, who've got the models, haven't really worked out, okay, how big is the ship? Because apparently just the Discovery model, right, or the Discovery ship, was apparently like 2.5 times bigger than the Enterprise. And they said in the scenes in Discovery where you had the Discovery here and the Enterprise next to each other, it was like a little baby. It was like, it was like it didn't fit. So they physically made it larger on screen, but of course that doesn't match the scale. So it's all arse about in that regards, for those who love that sort of stuff.
I got to tell you, in Star Trek, the distances and the size of stuff are wrong. Sometimes I don't know if it's because it's made in America and they don't understand what a kilometer is, but sometimes they go, oh, there's a Romulan bird of prey. It's 5,000 kilometers off the bow of the ship, and you look out and you can see it. And you're like, if it's 5,000 kilometers away, there is no way you would be able to see it that close to the ship. The other thing is Pike was hosting diplomatic dinners in his room, so maybe it was a large room because they know with the mission they're on that they're going to be doing that kind of thing with first contact. Okay, I'm just justifying it.
I hate to say this, dude, but you're pulling excuses out of your furry one. But I do like the fact that Pike's good at cooking. Hang on, is that where you got really into it? Like you're a bit of a cook yourself. Did you look at what he was cooking? Oh, dude, I could be a Pike myself because he's into the chef stuff and wears the apron and all sort of bizzo. What do you reckon?
I did like he was doing that. I thought that was really good. You've had other cooks in Star Trek before, but I just thought it was another side to the character that we haven't really seen in the captain do before.
And he's got a fireplace. I mean, an open fireplace on a ship. It's like, yeah, right.
Well, you know what?
Whatever. It looked good.
That's for those cold, long nights in space with Orion slave girls, isn't it?
Yeah, they need all the sensors to drop, all the environmental systems to go off, and they go, oh my god, we got no heat. Oh, hang on, the captain's got a fireplace in his quarters. Absolutely unbelievable. Sci-fi can get away with anything, yes, but this is Star Trek. In Star Trek, it has already predefined parameters all around it, right? And if someone says, well, this is the official size of the Enterprise, and these quarters physically will not fit in it, then that breaks the continuity that they've created. So anyway, we'll move on. Otherwise, we'll never get to the end of this. Of course, the other thing, aside from the ship looking the same, is the uniforms. And the things that I mean, obviously, they've made changes to it. So the insignias are more like a badge rather than sewn in. What I found interesting is that with number one's uniform, she's obviously wearing the miniskirt version, but she wears leggings, and I think that works. But the inclusion of the black on the side there, I'm not entirely sure why they've done that. For female clothing, they do that to give the impression that it's a slimmer design, and I don't know if that's intentional or not with this. But the fact that she does wear the skirt, but with leggings, I think works fine. I've got no problem with that at all. And of course, you get to see Uhura's cadet, well, what do you want to call it, trainee uniform, which is a completely different style and design. So, how have you found the outfits, old son?
I was really happy with them because I did think they wouldn't look as retro as they did. They haven't gone for the bell-bottoms yet, so I guess that is something they'll avoid. I've been generally happy with the production design of this entire show. I thought it was good.
One of the things that I did like, and of course the original series could never do this, Bunny, because of budget constraints, and they always, every time they beamed down on a planet, if it wasn't out the back of the studios, it was on a set, is they gave the crew jackets, right? And of course they dealt with spacesuits and all this sort of business. And I thought, for cold climates, and I thought, well, that's sort of made it a bit more realistic, and I really liked that. I think a lot of people always were critical of the fact that it's like they beam down all these planets. No one ever checks to see if there's oxygen or not. They just down they go, and everybody's happy. So, and of course, as we said, for the original series, you've got to allow for that, right? Yeah. But even in Next Generation and all those shows, it was very, very common for them to just beam down as is. And you go, oh, hang on, guys. And those, of course, those outfits are very, very skimpy and very wouldn't protect you at all against the elements. So,
I'm pretty sure. Cool. I'm pretty sure in the menagerie they actually had grey jackets on the away team, and I think the network executives were like, "What are they all wearing the grey jackets when we want Technicolor and all these colours?" So they had to scrap it because of that.
Yeah, but either way, it was a good addition that they've put that in, which is kind of cool. I've got a whole range of different pictures now. Actually, I'm just going to chuck this in. So we were talking about the Gorn earlier, right? Yep. And I've got a picture here of one of the things. So this is how you can sort of play with continuity but not break it. Of course, they show the Gorn, but as they're in the infant stage, right? So they don't look like the full-grown version that you see in the original series, which I think actually worked quite well. So it's a subtle way of getting around a certain problem, and I actually thought it worked quite well. But they've got to be careful as to how far they push it, because in the end they can't break the continuity of the original series. But good on them for finding a loophole in doing so.
Yeah. Did you enjoy the Gorn episode?
Yeah, I didn't mind it. I think there was a couple of them I recall. Yeah. I've watched this thing over so many weeks, I've actually forgotten what a lot of the earlier episodes were about. So I've just got random pictures that I'm just going to be chucking in for good measure. And of course, that episode also just quickly included your favorite Predator moment and Aliens references. I thought, good on you guys. Is it a homage or a ripoff?
What did you think that they included Gort from The Day the Earth Stood Still?
Yes. For those who haven't seen, I've got it way down here. I do actually have a picture of it. Hang on. Here we go. So it goes to show that even in the 24th century, there's still room for a 1950 sci-fi movie. Loved it. I thought Grouse, and that was in the pilot episode of the series. So when Pike's living in his country home, and he's still got an LED TV. So I thought that was kind of cool. But how good was that? Eh?
Yeah, I often think in sci-fi movies, sometimes they avoid, the crew going, hey, this is really similar to Aliens or something like that. I did like that in this universe that the captain of a starship is a fan of sci-fi stuff.
And I thought, and I was trying to find the image, and I may have made a mistake this for another show, but I could have sworn at some point he had an LP record player, but I couldn't find the image for it. So I thought, 400 years from now, they're still using LPs, but maybe I'm confusing it with something else. I agree with Gavin. Yes, it's live, Jim, but not as we know. Yep. Totally
there's always going to be someone in the room that argues vinyl is the best format ever, and you'll never get a better sound system.
Yeah, and 400 years from now, exactly right. Another character who made an appearance who was also referenced in the old days was Robert April. He was the first captain of the Enterprise. Yeah, so it's good that he made an appearance here. I mean, he's never. I don't recall him ever being on screen in the original series. Don't quote me on that. But the history books will always say he was the first captain of the Enterprise. And of course, people go, but hang on, Jonathan Archer was the first captain. No. This is this version of the Enterprise, the 1701 version, not the NX01 version. So here's a nerd.
How old is Archer in this? Is it possible he could make a cameo?
Oh Jesus! I'm not very good with the numbers on this one. Between Enterprise and it's over 100 and something years. 100 years, isn't it?
Oh, okay, maybe not then.
I don't know. Don't quote me on that, dude. I really don't know. So yes.
Daniel will probably know. Daniel can look it up for us while we're talking.
Yeah, someone look it up? The time frame between Enterprise and this show, or Discovery, they're all set at the same time. So I thought it'd be 100 and something years. It's been a while, 60 years, 70 years. So the answer is possibly yes. I'm going to take a stab in
that. That means T'Pau definitely could.
Hey?
T'Pau definitely could turn up.
Oh, yeah. You mean T'Pau or T'Pring?
No, T'Pau.
Just reckon, making sure. We'll get to T'Pring in a second, actually. Another thing that they've done, which is like, once again, skirting with continuity, but getting away with it, and of course, showing respect to the original series, of course, is showing the good old Romulan bird of prey, the original version, which is also from the original series as well. So they did this well, and they did this in Enterprise too, if I'm not mistaken. So I was wondering what they're going to show. They're going to bring up the big ass, classic warbird from Next Generation, but no, they kept it very, very simple, and I reckon it worked out quite well. This was an alternative universe, so it was very groovy.
I absolutely loved that episode because it took one of the original Star Trek episodes, and because there was an alternate universe, you had Pike's take on the same situation that Kirk had dealt with, and the different ways it would go. And it really is interesting because I was watching it going, Pike is making the right decisions, but they're wrong because it's not Kirk. So I really loved how they played with the original storylines and put a new twist on them because they're remaking them from a sort of different point of view.
Yeah, so the episode in question was Balance of Terror. And of course, that's when the Romulans first appear in the original series and they finally get to see what they look like. And of course, this is an alternative timeline. Now, the middle of the whole time travel thing is a bit of a wank, right? So for those who saw, I don't have a picture of it, I didn't even think to get it. The crystal that the Klingons happen to have look exactly like either a Kyber crystal from Star Wars or the crystal that Superman uses to build the Fortress of Solitude. But of course, when everything resets itself, does Pike still remember what Romulans look like? And if so, he's the only one who knows. So, what do you reckon?
He does remember, though, I think, because he knew what was going to happen to number one.
Yeah, so he now knows something that nobody else knows. So the temporal detectives will be on board for that one. Which is, and this only I only just saw this today, right? And for those who are huge fans of the original classic movies, the old Federation and the Fed Reds kind of got a bit of work over here. And I've got to say, look, absolute crap. I mean, this thing here is way, way, way too low. That part there is supposed to stick out here. And they've got the glittery sleeves as well. But I thought it is wartime. Maybe they've had to cut corners in the quality of their outfits, but Anyway, I just sort of chucked it.
Do you know what? You know what happened? They bought a dodgy lot from the Ferengi that were profiteering off like knockoff uniforms or something like that.
Yeah, no, exactly right. And of course, another thing that occurred in the series, and there's a lot going on, and a lot of things that hark back. We're sticking with the stuff that actually links back to the original series, of course, is the appearance of Mr. James T himself. And I thought they picked an actor who looks nothing like William Shatner. And I think the biggest concern I had with this is because Pike is the star of the show. Had they had someone who had William Shatner's physique, they would have been on a match with each other. And I think they deliberately picked an actor who's smaller physically in stature than Anson Mount. And I thought, that doesn't seem to work. At this point, Kirk would be a very imposing and striking figure. So what do you reckon? I thought it was I see why they've done it, and I don't necessarily agree with it, but because this guy, you're thinking, mate, he's not going to be the lady killer that we know from original series, not by a long shot. So, yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, he's the captain of the Farragut instead of the Enterprise, and I think, being captain on the best ship in Starfleet, and the Farragut, what we've heard in other things, is basically a crap ship. You probably.
Hang on. But I'm talking about the physical appearance of the actor. I couldn't give a shit what he's flying around in, right? He looks nothing.
No, but you're talking about his physical appearance, but also his confidence and stuff like that, I thought.
No. I'm not talking about the confidence at all. If you stand the two of them in the same scene together, I mean, Anson Mount is a much larger, more physically imposing guy, and the actor they picked for Kirk here is a lot smaller, right? Physically smaller, okay? And I think that's intentional because the idea is that it's Pike's show. You focus your interest on him. Yeah. Now, if you have, it's like saying, I've got the hunky guy here, but I've come in with a super hunk. All the attention goes straight over there. And I think it was on the minds of the producers to deliberately do it. And you see the Kirk in this, you go, there's no way in a million years that guy could play the Kirk that we see in the original series. I'm not being critical of it, but it's an interesting observation to say, okay, we need to make sure the audience is focusing on Pike is the cool guy here, even though in real life, in the universe, Kirk is the cool guy, even if at this point he's still lower down in his career. He's still a captain, and he still, as Sam says, he still bends the rules. So you can't detract from what we already know as being accepted fact. So that's where I was coming from. Nothing to do with confidence or anything like that. So yeah,
I think they've got to be very careful doing that too, because you can't go and recast Kirk and deliberately choose someone that hasn't got the presence of William Shatner because you don't want them to go up against Captain Pike, because the potential down the track is this guy might get his own show as well. So you have got to walk that line between doing right by Pike and Strange New Worlds, but also having in the back of your mind, this could be the Kirk that spins off into the second 5 years of the Enterprise doing, exploration.
Yeah. So ultimately I'm saying, Pike is a cool dude, but Kirk is a way cooler dude, right? And it's just, the show that you've seen Strange New Worlds, even if you take the first season of Strange New Worlds, the first season of original series, right? Kirk is way cooler. It's a no-brainer, right? But in this episode, they've deliberately made him less so because Pike is the focal point. It's not a criticism; it's an observation. Yes. With that in mind, Andrew said there's 109 years between Enterprise and Strange New Worlds, so good old Archer would be pushing the daisies, I think, at that point. So, yes, exactly right. Having said all that with the Kirk thing, I thought it was very interesting that they even stick good old Pike in the dreaded green. I couldn't stand this outfit that Kirk wore. It's like, what's the deal with it? It's like it's supposed to be the, but this is a diplomatic discussion he's having with the other guys. What was the deal with that? It's like it's got the leathery sort of feel to it. Oh, dude, seriously?
I think green is a neutral color, isn't it? That's why they put him in that. They only have Kirk in it once or twice in the original series, don't they? They don't use it a lot because it doesn't look that great.
Oh, looks shit. And I couldn't work out. It's like, what? And I know why they've done it. Or maybe it's a standard issue part of the uniform. And of course, he's having diplomatic discussions with another race at this point. But the fact that he got to wear this at all, I thought, oh, guys, where are you going?
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
So one thing we haven't brought up, I thought this show was very worthy of being the first show to have Space, the Final Frontier attached to the opening titles for a very long time. What did you think of them going back and doing that and reimagining the original Star Trek music and putting the... Did you enjoy that?
Yeah, I mean, it's very funny because in the original opening for the original series, the ship just went whoosh, 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 whoosh. Then with the newer series, they started flying around, like Next Gen and Voyager, they started flying around planets and all the rest of it. And I guess they had to find a bit of a middle ground to say, well, all right, we need to sort of show the beauty of the ship and where it's going, but we also got to see these environments as well. Look, I found the opening scene with the opening title sequence was really good. I don't know if I'd class it as memorable or one that's going to stick in my mind as like the greatest of all the ones we've ever seen, but it certainly wasn't an embarrassment, and it worked really, really well. And I put this on the screen. I'm just going to get to you in a sec. I put this on the screen. I took it off again. So yeah, he looked like a bit like Jim Carrey. I was thinking, okay, Jim Carrey's Kirk impersonator. Yeah, that's an interesting one. I hadn't thought of that one. So yeah, but otherwise, I think the opening titles were good.
Jim Carrey has done some parodies of Kirk as well. You can find them in living color on YouTube, I'm sure, but I digress. The other thing I wanted to bring up with you about the stories was traditionally with a lot of Star Trek, it takes till about series 3 for it to kick off and really find its feet.
Yeah.
I actually thought this was one of the best first series of a Star Trek they've ever done.
See, it's interesting because, and I agree with you, they've done a really good job, but I can see where improvements can be made, right?
Yeah.
Now, I personally am not a fan of the 235:1, the CinemaScope sort of look. I'd prefer a full 16:9 screen if it was up to my decision. Because that's designed for cinematic movies, and we're not seeing this in a cinema, so that part I don't like. There are aspects that work. A lot of it works really well, but there are parts that you're thinking, okay, they need to sharpen this up and refine it a little bit. And I do think that when they get to season 2, 3, it'll be really kicking goals. It'll be doing really, really well. So they started off on a high, and they've done very, very well. But I can see where there's room for improvements. And I think keeping the thing tighter is one of the key things. There are aspects about it, you go, you know what? The tension isn't there. The drama is just lacking a bit. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's in the lighting or the camera options or whatever. But I can kind of see it and go, you know what? That was good. But what I go, oh my God, was absolutely mind-blowing. I'm kind of not feeling it just yet. So, but for a first season, they're doing extremely well with it. So, yeah.
Well, sorry, go ahead. Sorry. Well, the other thing I thought was particularly good was they went back to single episode stories. Then the universe is going to be destroyed story arc, which they've done every single year with Discovery. I really thought it was refreshing. We have a problem. We solve the problem. We go on to the next episode without any baggage from this episode. Did you enjoy having individual stories over a big story arc?
It seems to work for a lot of people because anybody can just jump in at the start. They go, previously on whatever, they show little bits and away you go. And I think the season-long story arcs don't work for everybody. Those who think, I'm going to join at episode 6, they've got no hope of catching up as to what's going on. So I think with this, it actually does work because the original series was always based on that premise, as was Next Gen and Deep Space Nine, etc. So it's a good formula and it's a successful formula. For Discovery, it probably hasn't worked as well as I would have liked. And so I think having the adventure of the week, providing they don't make it too predictable and too simple, and it's like, oh, okay, I saw this in the original series here and Next Gen here and this there, and keeping it relatively different, I think you can get away with it, and it works quite well. And one of the things that I did like, even though it was kind of interesting, because in this episode, the Elysian Kingdom, it was very much like a shore leave sort of scenario where everybody's sort of dressed as different characters, and you go, oh, we've sort of seen this before where people were playing out their fantasies. But of course, there was actually a really solid message at the end of it. And of course, it was the child, the doctor's kid, who was creating this entire thing. So that spin kind of worked, even though the episode itself I thought was kind of ordinary, and I'm sure the actors had a lot of fun playing these really wacky characters, but it had a message. It was almost like a mirror universe scenario, but they did something completely different with it. And I think that kind of worked, as opposed to just doing a mirror universe story, if you know where I'm coming from. So, yeah,
that was the good thing about having individual stories, where if you have a story that isn't good and you do a story arc where you're lumbered with that for the whole season, I thought this was pretty good. There were stronger and weaker episodes, but there wasn't an episode I thought was a bad episode. This series.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. And as like Colin said, I myself prefer the story arc covers a season. I really like that. You get invested. You binge watch a whole a season in one go, and you get the whole story in one hit. Right? It's whether there's enough stories or enough story within the episodes to contain it all. The last thing you want is have filler ones that you go, well, that was a waste of time. We spent a whole episode doing nothing. Right? That's when it's stupid. Whereas in a show like this, they can say, well, this is our one story. We get it in and out within 45 minutes, 50 minutes, and it's all complete in the 18. So it's definitely preferential, but I can see for a Star Trek series why an episodic show is actually probably preferential to the story arc Because once again, if you get into like using Discovery as an example, you get 4 or 5 episodes in, you go, you know what, it's not working for me. You dial out, you don't even watch the rest of it. And the last 5 could be the best ones you could ever imagine. But then you've already jumped ship. You go, you know, I'm just not interested. Or as I said, you get in at episode 6. I've never heard of Discovery. I'm going to jump in at episode 6. I've got no frigging idea what's going on. I'm out again. So to keep an audience, keeping it episodic is probably not a bad idea.
What you were saying earlier, I totally agree with, where this was good, but you can see greatness a couple of years from now. The story arcs aren't there, but they're kind of playing it like Next Generation, where you have the Romulans come back and then the outposts disappear, and then you get the Borg introduced, and then 3 years in, you get the best of both worlds, and it's the best thing you've ever seen. And I can see this is where this is going with the Gorn, and, you know, the Gorn is slowly introduced and things like that. So I do think there is an arc. It's just a more subtle one that we're going to go through.
Yeah, so long as they don't box themselves into a predictable corner. They go, okay, we've sort of got through this season. All right, we need a bad guy. Who's the bad guy going to be? And you go, well, we can't have the Romulans, maybe the Klingons, maybe, you can't have the Borg because they won't appear again until next gen. And unless you create something brand new. But the problem is if you create something brand new, then you'll say, well, how come we didn't hear about this in all the future shows? So it's a very tricky situation. And I can imagine that's when they start bending their own continuity a little bit, unless they say, oh, no, we're going to go and the ship flies out to a planet we've never seen before with all these bad guys we've never heard of before. We contain it within a couple of stories, and then we come back again. It's been filed away in the Starfleet archives. Done. Problem solved. And they've done a little bit of it this season. This season there's been no one antagonist the entire way through. So, going to be very careful.
Well, the thing with boxing themselves in with the storyline for me is because they've had the time crystals and we know where Pike winds up, there is no threat to Pike. He can't die.
No.
So
you're right. All the main characters, the ones that we know carry on. Oh, absolutely. No matter what they do to Uhura, she's going to be kicking on until all hours, and Spock and all that. It's the other guys you're not sure of. And that sort of brings up the risk level for them. But continue on.
Yeah, no, that was really it. Where you've got like legacy characters, and you've even got within the show, well, we've seen what the future's going to be. There are some things, just can't happen. He can't die because he's got his fate to come along, unless they pull off some really great twist, which they might do. But that's the only thing for me where you're like, we know what's going to happen to this guy. Let's see what's happened. The other thing that has to happen that'll be interesting, because the whole point of the series, the menagerie, he knows what happens on that planet, so he wants to go back there because he knows we have to have that happen in this series if that's going to happen again.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll have to wait and sort of see. I think it's definitely got room for improvement. There's no denying that at all, and can really go places. But it's they are confined by the shows that took place before them and the shows that are going to occur after them. And the last thing, they've done really well to sort of complement it all together. And with that in mind, here's another picture I've got to show. Good old Sam Kirk. You can't have too many Kirks, so it's good old Jim's brother, and of course in the original series, William Shatner played Sam as well, had the mustache and everything. I thought that was kind of cool. You've got to work within the confines of what you've got. And the moment you start tinkering with it and go, your fans start going, hang on, be careful where you're going, because you could easily lose your fan base very, very quickly.
Well, the one thing they haven't been scared about is taking episodes that we've seen before and redoing them with a twist. And the one I thought was fantastic was a mock time, where you actually in Spock's dream, where you go to that arena and they actually start playing the retro music, and they do it from a different point of view. And I'm like, this is fantastic, because the original Star Trek fan in me is getting to see the original Star Trek done on big budget in widescreen. But the person who likes good stories in me is seeing it taken to another level, where they're doing current storytelling with good technology and a twist. And I think it's actually the difference between maybe the movie and this series. They're actually being respectful of the old series with this. I don't think they've done anything that could really offend fans yet. With Discovery, they changed the Klingons and now we kill babies and all this other stuff. This has been more like we take what we love with the original and we build on it to make a good show.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's definitely catering for the older fans, whereas Discovery was catering for brand new fans, inducing a lot of violence, a lot of swearing, a lot of adult themes, which a lot of people just said, nah, I can't handle that. Give me something a bit more simple. And for that reason, I think you're right. It's actually bringing the fan base back. That's probably a great formula that they've put together, and they go, shit, we can't believe this is actually working. I mean, as it is, you're talking about some the characters. I mean, like Spock and T'Pring. Like T'Pring didn't have that much to do in the original series, if I recall. But in here, she's actually got a lot going on, and they've done the whole thing of the swapping of the male female, sort of like in their minds and whatever else. And I can't think of what else to call that actually. And it's worked really well because I think a lot of the fans have been able to dial into it, and of course, you can introduce the comedic aspect as well, which is particularly important, rather than being serious the whole way through, which is the downside that Discovery had.
What I loved about it is I thought when they did we've swapped minds, they were going to do the zany, now I have to act like Spock and now I have to act like Kirk and T'Pring. But because they were Vulcans, they just basically go, Captain, this has happened. And like they are comic in the way they aren't comic. They're just Vulcans. And it makes it funny because they act like Vulcans would act, not try and pretend to be each other and do that whole, we've swapped bodies, so now you have to go. And it's actually the human Pike who says, well, now you're going to have to pretend and you're going to have to go through with it with them protesting. I thought that was a great way to look at one of these stories, which I don't think I've seen before.
Yeah, I totally agree. Now, we're going to finish up in a couple of minutes, but there's a couple of things I wanted to put in. I love the fact to make reference to the Prime Directive. You know, it's a term that won't catch on. I thought that was very, very clever, actually. So, yes, love it. And there's two others that I thought were very, very interesting, worth looking at. And we were talking about, what are we looking at here? Yes, I'm going to save one ripper for the last one. This one I thought was interesting. This was a really good cinematic moment, right? It was really clever. They got a force field around them walking on the hull of the ship. And I thought, why don't they do that more often in the other shows? If they need to go outside, just walk out on a force field, just wear normal clothes, even in First Contact when they had to wear the spacesuits and all the rest of it. So I loved it. I thought it was really, really clever. And all the people have signed the plate at the end of the ship, the oldest part of the ship there is. And I sort of think it's an example where you look at this and go, why didn't they do this more often in the other shows, even in Next Gen? So, yeah. I don't know. Just a thought. Yeah. What do you reckon?
It is. I thought that was fantastic. You don't even see it much. You see it on a couple of shows, not very much at all. I thought that was a particularly good character episode there, or what I was saying before.
Oh, yeah. There's no denying that at all. And the last picture I'm going to show, now you would have thought this. I certainly thought this and was like, I didn't see that one coming. The return of Cybok. Oh, good old Star Trek 5 lives. How good is that? And imagine all these people going, he's got what, a half brother? Hang on, who's this? Who's this dude? How's that? That was a real left field sort of scenario. What do you reckon?
This is a mark on how well this show is done, where you've taken, which everyone pretty much admits is the worst entry to the movie franchise, and you've made everyone excited about a character in it just by showing the back of his head. So it really is one of those things where I'm like, these guys are really playing for the fans because, like you said, most people who were watching it would have no idea. I was going to my wife, to Neil, that's Cybok, that's Spock's brother. That's from this movie. And she's like, what? No, I've never heard of that kind of thing. But by being able to do that on two levels where they introduce the old character to new fans, but old fans are like, oh my gosh, they've actually gone there. I think that's really shows a good showrunner, how you can work on different levels between fans and the new audience.
Yeah, I bet when they first came up with that, even some of their own crew members and the writers were going, "Who? Who's this?" I was like, "Haven't you seen Star Trek 5? What, that? No, hell no." But yeah, that's definitely the ultimate of fan service, I've got to say, and it's absolutely fantastic. And yeah, that was a good moment. And there are definitely, and that's examples where you see some of the stories and you go, you know what, this is really different. It's really unique. Of course, it's catering to a modern audience, but playing it safe, it's entertaining. Even as adults and kids can watch it as well. There's only a few moments where it's like, okay, there's a little bit of blood and gore, but that's few and far between. And other than that, it's actually focusing on the entertainment factor. And I think that's actually very, very important. So, which is absolutely fantastic. So all power to it. It's come out of absolutely left field from a couple of years ago when Discovery Season 2 was out. It's kicking all these goals. It's kicked the crap out of Paul Discovery. It's crapped on Paul Picard and sort of onwards and upwards from here. So I do wonder what its future might be.
This is the first year in a long time where I've gone, Star Trek is better than Orville.
Yeah, well, there's that too. And of course, a lot of people, when they do think of Star Trek, they don't think of the other shows. They think of Strange New Worlds first. So It's sort of just it's the come from behind winner. What can I say? So we're going to wrap up in a few moments' time. Before we do that, I've got to just chuck it out there. So for those who are interested in knowing more about good old Sci-Fi Zone, there's all of our socials. Jump on the old Twitters and the Instagrams and all that other stuff if you want to leave us your comments and your thoughts. If you're not going to contact us directly, so we're happy to hear what people have to say, which is absolutely fantastic. Any final words before we buzz off for this evening, Mr. Aaron, and your final thoughts on Strange New Worlds?
I loved the whole series of Strange New Worlds. It ended at 10 episodes, and I'm already like, oh no, I have to wait a whole year before we see more of this. So I was pleasantly surprised because I did not think I was going to find a Star Trek that, you know, was up there with Next Generation and the original series again. But there you go. That I know you didn't like it as much as I did, but I thought it was a really solid start to the show.
Yeah, I mean, it goes to the old adage, everything old is new again. Stick with what you know and what has worked before, and play on the strengths of that. Enough fan service for the fans to dial into it, enough there for newcomers to dial into it, and you can't go wrong at all, which is absolutely fantastic. So, yeah, I certainly enjoyed it. I had no problem with it whatsoever. But I'm already sort of like, okay, episodes are done. I've already switched off. So there needs to be something a little bit more meaty for me. Once you start killing off more characters, that's what you want to do. Yeah, you didn't want Hemmer to sort of just like get infected by the Gorn and just jump off the ship. No, I wanted someone to blow him apart, body parts going everywhere. Better blood and guts, mate. That's what you alien do. The alien thing. It's coming out of his guts, and his antennas are going completely psycho.
Well, I don't know if you saw Colin's comment earlier when he said when he fell off, he thought that the Gorn was going to do a chest burst moment out of his chest or something.
Yeah, that's an Alien 3 thing when she gives birth to the alien queen and she's fallen off the cliff. So there you go. Anyway, we're going to buzz off, everybody. Thanks for all joining us for a show that we just slapped together at the last minute. Good old Strange New Worlds, Yay team, party hard. It's going to be absolutely fantastic. I reckon season 2, they're going to sort of weed out the weak parts, and it'll just go from strength to strength. There's no denying that whatsoever. So, Mr. Aaron, you have a good night, old son.
You have a good night too, mate.
No worries. And we're back on Wednesday for Rip It Off the Card. In the interim, party hard, rock on, and keep on. Hang on, get on the camera. I'm going to get it right. Keep on trekking. Okay, see you guys. Take care.
See you. Bye.
Bye.